The Nazis fancied themselves as heirs to some kind of ancient so-called Aryan civilization, and their adoption of fires and torches was in keeping with that narrative. For example, the Olympic torch relay was introduced at the 1936 Berlin Olympics. There was no precedent for the kind of relay that we now take for granted. Minister of Propaganda Joseph Goebbels saw that by having anything that the Nazis could amplify, like a torch relay, that would somehow link them to a mythical Aryan past. This was a way to tie into the Nazis' claim of being inheritors to an ancient tradition. They were reinforcing this idea that they had legitimacy that long transcended their 20th century existence. You see in spectacles like the massive rallies, flames and torches in particular make repeated appearances. And in his book, Mein Kampf, Adolf Hitler was using torches as a metaphor for his concept of racial revolution. For the Nazis, it was about their show of force and about being something that transcended the millennia. Fire and flame was used to mark a number of turning points in the Nazi movement and in the Nazi seizure of power in Germany. For example, February 27th, 1933. That night, the Reichstag, the German parliament building, caught fire. The Nazis were able to persuade President von Hindenburg that this was part of a planned communist uprising. This was an entirely false story, but this pretext was used to invoke the Reichstag fire decrees, a state of emergency for the country, to suspend the right to assembly, the right of free speech, press freedoms. It allowed the police to arrest political opponents and hold them without charge. This shows how fire was in fact used as an excuse in the Nazi stranglehold on German society. On the night of May 10th, 1933, there was a very carefully staged and managed event across Germany, known to people popularly as book burning. College students, members of the Hitler Youth, but also some adults, burned upwards of 25,000 books that were considered so-called degenerate books. There were booklets circulated in the days before, giving students proclamations to make as they threw specific authors' works into these big bonfires. There was a fire oath that said, "We are burning these books against the falsification of our history and disparagement of its great figures. We are doing this for reverence for our past." The Nazis were certainly not unique in their use and embrace of fires and flame and torches, particularly to American eyes. We have images in our heads of burning crosses set on fire as an act of threat by the Ku Klux Klan, and all kinds of invocations of fire to cause deadly violence during the civil rights era. The white supremacists who marched in Charlottesville, Virginia in August 2017 were deliberately making connections between themselves and Nazis and other fascist movements of the 1930s, partly through their use of flame and carrying torches, but also through the language they used, through the t-shirts they wore. This was a not at all subtly veiled threat. They were deliberately invoking the iconography of these earlier dictatorial regimes.
You will not replace us! You will not replace us!
Fire is really an enduring symbol and gesture, I think in part because it is inherently dramatic and because it is inherently threatening. It signals violence and destruction, and it is poised to spread quickly and to engulf.